Well, a man who once said he wasn't interested in being president of Egypt now appears to be the top candidate for the job. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stepping down as the country's military chief, but today he is running against the left-wing candidate, Hamdin Sabahi. As Al Jazeera's Caroline Malone reports, millions are expected to vote in the next 2 days.
This is the man expected to be Egypt's next president. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is the former defense minister and army chief. He's essentially led Egypt for the last 10 months, since the coup that deposed President Mohamad Elmasry.
The Egyptians are coming down to write their history and plan for their future. All the world is watching.
Voting will take place over 2 days, and turnout will be a good indicator of how much support there is for Sisi. People in Egypt have suffered through 3 years of instability since mass protests ended the nearly 30-year rule of Hosni Mubarak.
We want security for the country. We don't want protests. All the young people who are calling for protests can wait until the country gets on its feet and the security and the poor people are able to make a living.
Security is a concern. There have been a number of attacks in the last few months against institutions, including Cairo University. 400,000 security personnel are involved in protecting the public on polling days, with a goal of encouraging people to come out and vote.
People feel reassured in terms of security, and the police and the army are protecting the area very well.
The only other candidate for president is Hamdin Sabahi, who came third in the 2012 election. But recent polls suggest more than 50% of Egyptians favour Sisi. It's not yet clear if those numbers will be reflected in votes. Caroline Malone, Al Jazeera.
Mohamad Elmasry is a visiting scholar at the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver. He joins us from Seattle this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
By all accounts, this is Egypt's second democratic election, but when one party is banned and the president, like him or not, is overthrown in a military coup, what does that say about democracy in Egypt?
Well, I would dispute the idea that this is a democratic election. I think from a purely political science perspective, you can't eliminate the competition and then say you're holding a democratic election. If you look at what's happened in Egypt over the past 10 months, the group that won 5 consecutive elections in Egypt has been effectively eliminated. They've been banned and declared a terrorist organization. We have 40,000 political prisoners, according to the latest data. The media environment is entirely one-sided and hysterical. The anti-military coup perspective is not represented at all. All of the opposition networks have been shut down. So under these circumstances, it's not possible to hold a democratic election. So in many ways, I think this election will formally cement a type of authoritarian order in Egypt.
So is this a lose-lose scenario for the United States? After all, they do not like the issue of the military coup, but they were also not fans of Mohamad Morsi in the Muslim Brotherhood. So now we may be looking at Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, but as you point out, you believe this election is a sham.
Yeah, well, I think that the United States has made a strategic error in basically tacitly supporting this military coup. The United States desires stability from Egypt and from the Middle East region, and what we've seen over the past 11 months is really unprecedented instability in Egypt. Military coups and military orders, particularly in this day and age, are inherently unstable. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has presided over the country over the past 11 months and over this period of instability, and I don't think that that's likely to change, unfortunately. So I think we're likely headed for more polarization and instability in Egypt, and that's not what the United States foreign policy desires.
So what about the supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood? After all, they cast the majority of ballots in the last election. This time, they're boycotting. The Muslim Brotherhood is officially boycotting the elections. But what about the people who once backed the Muslim Brotherhood? Are they going to boycott as well?
Yeah, all indications are that, first of all, Egypt is a split society. If you look at the polling data, the post-military coup polling data, Egypt is a split society. About half of the people seem to support the military order, and about half of the people seem to be against the military coup and be relatively sympathetic to the former president, Mohamad Elmasry. So those people are unlikely to vote. So I think you can expect, assuming the numbers aren't manipulated in any way, I think you can expect a fairly low, fairly modest turnout figure of somewhere between 30 and 40% of voters.
Regardless of which way we look at this, will the people of Egypt wind up being the ultimate losers? After all, unemployment is rampant. An estimated 12 million people there do not work, do not have a way of feeding their families. So what happens to them next?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that this is kind of a lose-lose situation, and the Egyptian people are the biggest losers. The biggest problem in Egypt really for decades has been autocratic rule. Autocratic rules create inefficiency from the government. There's really no incentive for the government to perform in an autocratic environment, and so we're headed for more of that. I think the hope after 2011 was that a democratic order, regardless of who was in office, would bring about economic growth and stability by creating a series of checks and balances. That's what we had in Egypt up until the military coup. That has all been reversed now.
Mohamad Elmasry, he is the visiting scholar at the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver, joining us from Seattle this morning. Mohamad, thank you very much.